to welcome to Jackie's Literary Corner. I am Jackie, and I thought today would be a good day to do an update. I'm off from work, and I'm working the next 3 days, and then I'm going to be busy after that. So I decided let me go ahead and update you guys on what's going on with my reading and some horror movie updates as well. Which is funny considering I just read a book called Horror Movie, which is my first thing. I finished reading Horror Movie by Paul Tremblay, and he's a very interesting author because he's very ambiguous with his endings, and I don't know what to think of this. I mean, it felt, it's more of a homage to slasher movies, and I'm not a huge slasher movie fan. I mean, I've watched a couple, I Know What You Did Last Summer, and I guess House of Wax, the remake, by the way, not the original with, what is his name? I can't think of his name. That one actor, Vincent Price, not the one with Vincent Price. That was the original, but the remake with it's Jared Padalecki and that one girl, that one actress. The only other time I've seen her is Are You from the Dark, and then she did one of those teen, very adult movies. I remember her being in that was really popular, and then I think it's the same girl. Which the plot of the original is very different from the plot of the remake. It's a completely different thing, and it's kind of funny because that's kind of this movie is kind of about this book, not movie book. It's kind of about that, how you have an original horror movie from back in the different time, and then they decide to reboot it, and now when they talk about doing it, they do say they're going to stay true. And it's that whole concept of, remaking a classic. And that whole concept is really fascinating to me because it's like, it can go really well or it can go really bad. And then there's also people that are biased to the original and they can't accept a different version, and then sometimes you gotta think, okay, how much should we change, and how do we update it for modern audiences? Do we need to update it? Maybe we need to keep it the same to make a point. Maybe it was already brilliant to begin with, so we should keep it the way it is, but maybe there's some things we need to change, and then of course, or there's some people who just do it for a cash grab. I think a lot of people think the live actions, and they probably are, even though I enjoy some of the live actions of the Disney movies, most of them, I mean, if not all of them, are probably cash grabs. And then there's people who are trying to cash in on Harry Potter, and then, with Harry Potter and Lord of the Rings, and there's so many adaptations, and they're not even reboots. They're just, I mean, although now they are doing a reboot of Harry Potter, which is hilarious, because at one time before, there was one time where I said it would make a great TV show. I did a whole video on why I think, what they could do if they made a TV show, and now, years later, now we decided to make it a TV show so that J.K. Rowling can get more bucks. And of course, J.K. Rowling has basically tainted her reputation. In fact, I shouldn't even be bringing her up and giving her attention, so that I'm going to stop talking about that. But I don't know what to think of this. I don't know if I don't completely love it, but I don't hate it, and I know there are some people who are just really disappointed by it, but actually I wasn't entirely disappointed. But it wasn't like, oh my god, this is the best book ever. It was more like, but it also, I wouldn't call it like an book for me. It was good, and it really got me thinking about the filmmaking industry and the pretentiousness of some of the people who make those independent ones, and just in that environment, in the kind of people who make these films, and what are they like. And also I like the sections where, because it goes back and forth between the original making of the horror movie and then the present day when they're talking about remaking it, and there's only one actor from the original that's still around, and he's getting involved, so the story is told from his POV, and like seeing him going to conventions and stuff. So I thought that was really cool. That all that stuff is interactions. I mean, there's only like really two, like I think two scenes, but I thought they were really fun. You know, seeing that kind of environment and seeing it from the perspective of the people, the writers and the actors and the makeup artists and stuff, and seeing their point of view of the fans approaching them and how obsessed they could be, and the observations that these actors and writers have of us, the fans. And I'm all I always wonder, am I, when I was reading, I'm like, I wonder if I do anything weird or anything that those actors will notice me, or maybe I don't even do anything, maybe they don't even notice me, or maybe they do, and it's not until I approach people, I get up to my chance to interact with them. Like I'm curious, but I'm also worried about what they would think of me as a fan. Like, what kind of fan am I to them? Like, do I? I mean, I don't think I do anything weird, but it was kind of interesting. It did get me thinking about that, like wondering how myself or how Terry and I are as fans, how we interacted, how we act when we meet these actors or writers. Or maybe because I'm a shy person, they feel bad for me or something. I don't know. I'm curious, but then at the same time, I don't know. Maybe I wouldn't want to know what they're thinking about me or my friend. But yeah, it was. I mean, there was an asshole encounter, an encounter with a fan that was kind of an asshole to our guy, and so it was kind of a funny moment the way he, how he's able to hold his own against this fan, and um but yeah, it's an interesting book. It's probably not it's not a book for everybody. I mean, I think if you're a slasher horror movie fan, then you might think this is really cool. And it does have a bit of an ambiguous ending, like with the cabin at the end of the world. That also kind of had an ambiguous ending. Which, by the way, I heard that the movie. I haven't watched the movie yet. I know it's like a year or two old, and I still haven't watched it. But I hear that it does change. I think I've heard that it changes the ending. I'm not sure though, but I think the ending did change in that adaptation of that book. But I do want to read Paul Tremblay's other work. Because I'm like always trying to find authors other than Stephen King, or like explore other horror authors. And, I'm still trying to do that. Like, I started doing that a few years ago, and I've kind of slowed down a little bit on that. But I'm still always looking for horror authors that are different from Stephen King. And Paul Tremblay, I'm curious to read more of his work. And maybe I'll use the library to help with that, because I do have a challenge to myself in mind for 2026 to start going to the library again regularly, which I did attempt that this year. It's just, again, I'm trying to find the perfect opportunity to go, because I'm like, I want to read the books I own, the ones I purchased, spent the money on. But then when I go to the library and I bring home a library book, that's my priority, to finish those so I don't have to keep renewing it. But anyway, I've already ranted about that enough. So, but yeah, this was good. I mean, it wasn't like, I think a lot of people could find enjoyment in this, and if you're a 90s kid like me, I think you'll especially feel a little nostalgia, because the original horror movie was filmed in the 90s, in 1993, I think they said. So but yeah, it's probably not the kind of horror book for everybody. I mean, it's not as, like, the scares aren't as, like, they're a little more subtle and more creepy, the scares in this. Now, of course, I'm not one that gets scared when I read a book. I mean, of course, I'm reading this, I finished it during the day, and I wasn't reading it at night, and I'm reading it while at the same time watching some horror films. So, but yeah, when it comes to horror books, I don't get scared. I mean, which is funny. At work, I was talking to a customer about horror movies versus horror books, and she brought up The Exorcist. Now, I kind of got a little mixed up. I kind of messed up there because I, implied that I had read the book, but actually I have not read the book yet. I was getting that mixed up with some of the other ones like Omen, The Omen, and Rosemary's Baby. Those were the ones that I've read. Oh, and Psycho. I've read Psycho. But I think I might have confused her and implied that I read Exorcist yet, but it's more like I want to read that one. And there's actually a new edition of it with a green cover, and it's a hard, like they have the mass market paperback one, and then I saw at BJ's the other day that they are a hardback version of it, and I almost bought it, but I decided to get this one first, and stick to getting that one on Kindle, The Exorcist. And everyone's always talking about, and people that aren't into horror, like, how can you read that? And, she was talking about how I would think that the book would be more scary because it's more detailed. And for most people, yeah, it probably would be more scary because it is more detailed and probably more graphic. But I was trying to explain that movies affect me more because you have the sound effects, you have the actors, you get the visual, not just your own imagination. And maybe that's a cheat or whatever, but yeah, I mean, like, I don't know. I'm sorry, but I get more scared with watching something than rather just reading it. Although I was telling Terry afterwards, I was a little embarrassed because before she left, I continued our conversation because I really wanted to talk, because I was excited, because for once I got to talk about something that I was excited about talking about, that I was really passionate about. But of course she had to go, she was going home, and I added my 2 cents to explain to her my thing about how, with movies and TV shows, I get more scared. But saying, well, I guess if I thought about it, maybe I could get scared with the book. And then she kind of laughed it off. I was like, oh, we're still, oh, I can't believe you're still talking about that. I must have really got you thinking about it. And just, it felt a little condescending, a little, like, dismissive. But maybe I'm reading too much into it or whatever. But I was kind of felt awkward, embarrassed, because I have been thinking too much about things and worrying too much about things. Like, so yeah, that was, and I just felt incredibly awkward about it. I mean, I'm okay now. I'm not like crying about it or anything. This is kind of, like I said, awkward. I felt a little embarrassed. But anyway, I do want to read it. I'm still excited to read it. I just haven't got it yet. So, but anyway, yeah, so this was, like I said, if you're a 90s kid who likes slasher movies, then, I don't know, maybe you will like this. Maybe. Well, I mean, he is a very interesting author. Very intriguing author. And it was really cool. So, I don't do this too often, but I did read the acknowledgments. Like, I don't read the acknowledgments when they're really long. But, because I'm lazy. But I did read the acknowledgments because it was really short, like half a page or whatever, maybe. And it was really cool because he also gave credit to this author who I listened to her podcast. Bria Grant is her name, or not author. No, she's a filmmaker. Sorry, she's a filmmaker. Or no, I'm getting her mixed up with. Well, anyway, she's the author or the filmmaker. I can't remember which one is the filmmaker. I'm sorry. I mean, I just listened to her podcast, and I'm still listening to one of them now. But yeah, that's why I'm bringing that, because I actually listened to her podcast, and they have mentioned that they're friends with Paul Tremblay, and they've had him on the show. But yeah, that was like, oh, I know her. I've listened to her podcast, and so I have to double check on that because I can't remember if she's the writer, or if she's the filmmaker. I want to say she's the writer, and then her podcast partner, Mallory O'Mara. Mallory O'Mara is one of them. So one of them is a writer and one of them is a filmmaker, but I cannot remember. They're both readers, obviously, but I cannot remember which. No, I can't. I mean, I've listened to so many of their episodes, but I can't remember for some reason in this moment. But like I said, I just bring her up because she's mentioned in the acknowledgments. So I was like, oh, I know who that is. But yeah, it's kind of like, it's one of these things where, like, you have actors in Hollywood that are so famous, everybody knows them, including yourself. You've heard their name 1,000 times. But then when it's someone that is only, like, they're kind of not, they're not, like, super famous, right? But, you're familiar with their work. You are personally a fan of their work, or at least you're familiar with them. It's kind of exciting when you see their name and you can say, "Oh, I know who that is, and I like them, and that's cool." And but so yeah, I don't know what I'll read next. I mean, I think the Pallbearers Club is vampires, includes vampires. So I don't know. I might read that one, but I still haven't read what was that? The Southern Woman's Guide to Slaying Vampires. I cannot think of the author's name at the moment. I've been meaning to read that one, but I still haven't read it because I've kind of gone back and forth with the vampire phase. But yeah, so we will see what I read next. I'll see whatever is at the library when I finally do go back. But anyway, so I did finish Horseman on my Kindle, and I was kind of disappointed. That was one that I was kind of disappointed by. Okay, so here's my problem. So my first exposure to The Legend of Sleepy Hollow was not the original short story, but was Tim Burton's film with Johnny Depp and Christina Ricci, and the Are You Afraid of the Dark episode. The Are You Afraid of the Dark episode probably was the first one, my first exposure, because I never saw until like last year. I had never watched the Adventures of Ichabod and Mr. Toad, that Disney movie. And then now I've seen, and then a few years ago there was the Sleepy Hollow TV show, and I just started watching reruns of it on streaming. And so that was my exposure was adaptations, particular adaptations. And so I was expecting that version with where the ghost was real and it wasn't like, oh, is he real or not, or like, oh, maybe it's just, it's not, and I was expecting Ichabod to be this likable, maybe awkward and sweet, but like awkward nerd type character, but very sweet and romantic, and Katrina loves him and everything, and he's just like, I was expecting someone likable, but then you realize if you read the original short story, Ichabod is not likable. He's kind of an ass, and is, kind of just one, like, there's really no one likable in the original short story. And Katrina is kind of vain and selfish, and, when she wants to marry a rich guy, she wants to marry Brahm, and she's just purposely flirts with Ichabod, I think, if I remember. I mean, it's been a while since I've actually read it, because once I read it, I was like, okay, I don't like this. It was a short story, so I was like, let me read it all, and I liked the writing, but, and then, so, I didn't like it. I was very disappointed in it. So, Horseman by Christina Henry, I would give Christina Henry this. She stays true to the original short story with her characters. Because Ichabod does appear in the story, just later in the story. I mean, even saying that might be a spoiler, but, even acknowledging that it might be a spoiler might be spoiling it. But all I'm going to say is he does appear in the story. And like, Brahm is still kind of an arrogant, can easily be provoked, very hot-tempered and obnoxious, but he's a little mellowed out and more mature in the story, because the Horseman, A Legend of Sleepy Hollow, takes place, I think people say in their reviews that it was 30 years later. I don't remember, but I think I've read that it was 30 years later, where Katrina and Ichabod are grandparents. Or not Ichabod, Katrina and Brahm are grandparents now. So they're still together, they're happily together and everything. And the whole time I'm like, no, I want her to love Ichabod. And, and but that's not the original story. In the original story, Ichabod's an asshole, and there were so many things that were annoying about that story. Like, it was so, the story is from the perspective of their grandchild, Ben. Oh, and it's kind of, I'll talk about this more in my wrap up, but Ben is transgender. So, and Ben sees himself as a boy. So that does play a role in the first part of the story, and it kind of makes things complicated, especially for Katrina and Ben's relationship. So I'm going to say, I'm trying not to elaborate on it because I want to save it for my wrap up, where I will rant about it. But Ben was so annoying and frustrating. I know Ben is a 14-year-old, so I'm going to say, and I am aware of that, but oh my god, that kid was so annoying. It was so hard for me to like them. And then the story felt very modern, and the way it was written, like, a little too modern for my taste. And when it comes to historical fiction, I want it to stay true to the tone of the time period. I mean, you can modernize the writing, because I get that a lot of people find the writing of older books boring. I mean, I struggle with the older a book is. And funny thing is, I think it was at the end of last year or the beginning of this year. I don't remember. I have to look it up. I think last year I read the spell book of Katrina Van Tassel, which was the whole story from Katrina's perspective, and that one also used the whole Ichabod's actually likable, and he's the love interest. He's the one Katrina truly loves, and they did a more, But I didn't like how things turned out in that version but I like the rest of the story, and I was thinking, I don't know how I feel about it. But then after reading this one, I kind of prefer the spell book. I kind of like that one better. And like, Katrina wasn't as annoying as even though she was a teenager, but she was an older teenager, so that was probably part of it, that she was probably like 16 or 17, maybe 18, while Ben was 14 years old, 14-year-old, that was in their mind, in their soul, they were a boy, so they acted like a boy. And but yeah, that was a disappointment. But I don't know, it was kind of a disappointment. I mean, I do like that Christina Henry kept the supernatural stuff. Like, I like how a lot of adaptations stick to it being supernatural. Like, the only version I've ever seen where they stuck with the original story's ambiguity of it maybe wasn't supernatural, it was just in the imagination. Or at least that's what someone interpreted as, that they did this, was the Disney Ichabod and Mr. Toad. I watched a video discussing that movie and how great it is as a Halloween movie, and like, this woman, the narrator, she was talking about how she thinks that she, like everybody else, prefers the supernatural, where the Headless Horseman is real, but that maybe that she thinks the Disney version did kind of stick to the whole, maybe the ghost isn't real and it's all in Ichabod's head. And like, she points out something in the movie that's, really quick, that you don't really notice unless you pause and really pay attention. But I think people would find it more fun and entertaining is if it was really a ghost. Like, if the Headless Horseman was real. Like, you can keep the whole Brom messing with Ichabod and everything, but just, I think a lot of people want them to stick to, actually, the Headless Horseman is real, and it's not just some silly little mischief that Brom is paying. Like, there is really a ghost. And I was worried in that version of Horseman that they wouldn't stay with that they would, go in the direction of, it wasn't real, but then they wouldn't have the story. I feel like Christina Henry wouldn't have the story she has. So, like, I don't know how you can do that and still make an interesting story, a long enough story. I mean, maybe I'm being unfair to that idea, but I don't know how you can expand that if it turns out that it's not, like, real. Like, how can you do a story like, a really good story of the Headless Horseman, and it turns out that the Headless Horseman isn't real and not a real ghost. So there were some of it I like, some little things here and there, but mostly I just thought it was okay. I was a little disappointed by it and annoyed by it. There were a lot of things I was annoyed by. But it wasn't the worst book ever, you know. It was like, it wasn't bad. And I'm not, you know, I'm definitely like with Paul Tremblay. I definitely would like to check out more for work. Of course, I said that about another author that I tried last year. I cannot remember her name. Her book was the one of her book that I read was The Haunting of Ashburn House. I think it was something like that. And I meant to check something more of her work, but every time I look at it, but I never buy any more for work. I mean, like, if they had it at, you know, the Outpost bookshop, then maybe I would buy it because it would be a lot cheaper. I mean, I could get it on Kindle. You know, I might do that because at least that would be cheaper, and then I don't have to have a bunch of, you know. So I mean, that's the thing is, at least with Horseman and Spellbook, I have both of those on Kindle, so it's not taking up space on my shelf. That's my logic. And it's not. I only spent like the most expensive book. I mean, I don't know. Maybe they're talking about new, but every time I see people talking about, you know, books are expensive. You know, Kindle books, ebooks are super expensive. I'm like, well, I mean, granted, I'm not, you know, like, but it was only like $3.99 or $4.99. You know, the Horseman book, while it will be at Books A Million. I mean, I don't know. Maybe they're comparing it to some, you know, other stores, but when I compare it to Barnes & Noble and Books A Million, you know, and maybe because it's a little bit older, because I think that one is older. Like, I don't think it's her newest book. But, like, I'm thinking, comparing it to Books A Million, which is 20 or more. I mean, sometimes it might be, like, you know, close to 20, but, like, but it's usually more than $10, and I haven't seen any, like, unless it's a new, like, a debut, like, debuts or new books, yeah, they're gonna be more expensive, but, I mean, I guess maybe that's what they're talking about. If you want to buy a newer book, it's going to be more expensive. But anyway, but yeah, I mean, either way, I'm thinking it's not a big deal, that even if I end up not loving it. I mean, the only thing I feel bad about is that I'm probably not going to read Horseman ever again. But who knows, maybe I will. Just spur of the moment decision, I might decide to read it again one day. But anyway, so that's the other, you know, so those are some of the spooky books I've been reading. I think I might start this one again, come back to this one. This is not scary and it's not Victorian literature, but it is inspired by, actually, no, I think she was inspired by Regency literature. So I guess I don't know if it really counts, but I'm gonna, read this one, The Trouble with Miss Montgomery Hurst by Katie Lumsden, our own Katie Lumsden from Books and Things. And I love reading her quote at the bottom. It says, a single man in possession of a good fortune must be wanted in a wife, but why did he choose her? I love that line. It's like the referencing Pride and Prejudice, but then adds but why did he choose her? But anyway, so I'm gonna start reading. I want to start reading this soon. But also I don't know if I'm gonna do. There's also, like I said, I did think about reading Shirley and Lady Anna for October. I mean, I still got time. And then, you know, I wanted to read the history of Japan. I've been meaning to read that because I keep thinking about that most recent, the Miyoko sisters. Sorry, I don't know Japanese, so I'm probably mispronouncing that. But I was like, I don't want to, you know, I'm like, let me read a history, you know, on Japan first. But then I keep coming back to thinking about reading, The Witching Hour. I've been meaning to do that one. Come back to that one. That one's a little longer, so I will not be able to get through that in 2 weeks. I think it's 2 weeks left. And there's so many. There's the Magician, the Magician King, which is the sequel to the Magicians. Getting that, and then the Book of Life, which is the third book in the All Souls series, because now it has the Times Convert, which, like I said, I think that is about Matthew's son. I cannot think of his name at the moment, but which, by the way, that's one of the things I watched. I watched season 2 of A Discovery of Witches, because I had just read the book. So what I'm thinking about doing, what I did last year and I'm going to do again this year, is that I read the second book and then I decided to watch season 2. And now I'm going to read book 3 at some point and then watch season 3 And I'm going to just ask for it as a gift, instead of just, because I know it's on streaming services, but like I said, I want to read the book first. The Book of Life first before I watch season 3, which is what season 3 will be based on. So I'm gonna watch. I want to read the book first, and so I'm gonna wait before I watch it, even though it's on streaming now, I think. And so I watched that, and because I watched that, I was like in the mood for my witchy movies. So I watched Practical Magic and The Covenant. Which I want to know why was that not as popular? Because I thought, was it because the special effects were bad or something? Was the story cheesy? I'm kind of curious. I'd like to watch reviews of it, because I thought that movie was great and I would love to see the sequel, because I think there were plans. The way it ended in a way that they could have made a sequel. But I think it didn't do well. But I thought it was great. I loved it. I had a good time with it. I liked the characters and the idea of linking the whole Salem witch trials and all that to modern day, and how you had these 5 families of real witches and they survive, and you have their descendants who are the main characters in the story, and the main boys, and which is interesting, they're boys instead of girls. And there's this, and it mixes that whole story with modern, these modern witches. And there was actually one line where they referenced the story, the original, and one of the boys I haven't read that since middle school or early high school. Which I guess that means they are in some kind of college years. I was confused. That was the only thing that confused me, is I didn't know if they were in college or still in high school. But then when they referenced the Crucible itself, he did reference, I think he did say something along the lines of, I haven't read that since high school. But yeah, I always like those kinds of stories where, mix mythology and with, as if it's real, and it's not just a myth, and that there are people, descendants of the people in the original myth, that are still around and all that. I think that is really cool. I always like that. So I should watch reviews and see what people say about The Covenant, why people don't, and see if maybe they'll talk about why people don't love, why that movie didn't do well. And then last night I started watching Hocus Pocus. But I wanted to finish horror movie today, so I stopped Hocus Pocus early so I could do some reading before I go to bed. And that way I wouldn't have as much to read this morning of horror movie. So I stopped it. I'm not finished with it yet. I could have easily finished it before 10 or a little bit after 10, because it's not a super long movie. But I'm one of the many people who was kind of there were aspects of the sequel movie that were kind of cool, like the idea of the actresses that played the younger versions of Mary Winifred and Sarah Sanderson, I really they did a really good job. They did a good job at mimicking the original actresses. They were really good. I really like that, and I like how we do a flashback of them. And it was kind of cool that the sequel even existed after all this time, and I'm glad that everybody, like all three of them, came back. Um, and they did do a new song, which that was kind of cool, kind of like, rolling my eyes. But it definitely felt like they were trying too hard to recreate the magic of the original, and they were just doing imitations, and it was so weird seeing them, especially Sarah Jessica Parker. And there were times like that was one of those moments, like seeing her do the mucka mucka muck or whatever it was, like that little the ditzy thing that Sister Sarah does, where she says that, and it says it like in a baby voice and is being all silly and stuff. And then so Sarah Jessica Parker does that again, and it was not the same. It felt like she was just doing it just because, oh, we did it the first time, this is a sequel, so I should do it again. And I'm sure that they genuinely wanted to do it and were excited, but it's just I don't know. It can't be helped that if it's a sequel to a really old movie, it's not going to be the same. It's almost like they're trying too hard to recreate the original, and even though they do something completely different with the story, it felt like just a rehashing the original with a different characters. I remember. I mean, it's been a while. I need to rewatch it. Which is funny because I enjoyed what they did with the Haunted Mansion, where they did the reboot. I thought that was really good, but that was also because they were doing a completely different story. The only thing that was the same is the physical Haunted Mansion. But other than that, they were doing this completely different thing. They had a different ghost story within the mansion, and a different problem. It wasn't about a family, it was about a group of people coming together. I mean, there was a family element to it, but it was more like a found family, because you had two characters that were family, like a mother and son, but then the rest of it was these characters were not related to them. They created a found family element to the story. It's a little silly, but it did something completely different. While the Hocus Pocus sequel, and maybe they felt like, oh, we have to do it this way, because what else are we gonna do? Is that they brought them back, the sisters. Someone lit the black pink candle, and the sisters returned. And they created havoc, and they were trying to make sure they lived forever and that they didn't get destroyed again. And it was basically doing the same thing, just different people were involved. Like, different people had brought them back. And I think that was the problem, is that when they were making the sequel, they were basically just doing the same story, just with different characters. And yeah, there were different elements of, like, them reacting to modern technology and stuff like that. And they tried to tweak it, or change things a little bit with, like, a different song, and that they would all sing, and but I'm sure it was fun for the actors to bring the characters back. I'm sure it was great, like, and we appreciate it, but then it's just, that's the problem. That's the tricky thing about sequels, is if you make a sequel years later, if you can't find a way to do a completely different story, then there's a chance it might not be perceived as being as good as the original. But yeah, so I haven't even watched it yet. It is, I should watch it again just to see how I feel, but I'm probably gonna feel the same way. But yeah, it was just a disappointment. But like, wow, the Haunted Mansion, the remake of that one, it wasn't even a remake. It was just I guess it wasn't really a remake. It was a reboot. Where they did it again, but they did a completely different story. Now, of course, they're gonna have people that probably didn't love that one and still prefer the one with Eddie Murphy. But I love both. Like with Hocus Pocus, I just didn't. care for the sequel for the reasons I stated. But anyway, I also did my Stephen King. I started my Stephen King marathon where I picked up a couple Stephen King books. I mean movie adaptations. Like I watched The Shining, the Jack Nicholson version, and I did put because I've never seen it before, and I have not seen it on TV. I did put the one that Stephen King himself did, the miniseries that he made, because he famously did not like Stanley Kubrick's film. I put that on my wish list, my Amazon wish list, so I'm gonna, because I would love to watch that one, and I don't know if it will ever come on TV, and I'm gonna love the story, I mean, the only thing that might hinder it is the special effects, but it's 90s, so of course special effects are gonna be a little silly, but doesn't take away if the movie is gonna be, it's still the same story, so it doesn't, I'm gonna love it no matter what, probably, but, but I watched that one, and I paid more attention to it, because last time I attempted to watch it, it was more like, I saw it on TV, and it was like, let me watch it. So I put it on TV, but I was cleaning my room at the time. It was during the day. So it was just not a good time to watch it. and then I watched Rose Red. I watched that one every year. I love that. I still love it. I know a lot of people will criticize they say, the whole special, you just see the ghost and everything, and things are more scary when you don't see it. But I still personally love it. A great story, and I thought the ghosts were really cool and creepy, and then I also watched Salem's Lot, the Rob Lowe version, and Robert Lowe and Rutger Hauer, and I like that one. I think that one's good. I tried watching the one from the 70s. First, I personally, I know that I'm an outlier here. I'm the only one who probably doesn't like it, but the one from the 70s, it was creepy and atmospheric, but what they did with Barlow, going for the more Nosferatu look, I know for some people, yeah, that's terrifying. Seeing that for the first time would be terrifying. But I still prefer, Rutger Hauer's version that stayed true to the. I think people have said that one's, and I don't remember for sure, but I think Rutger Hauer stays true, is more closer to the book version of Barlow. And I kind of prefer that. I personally think that's more scary, because he looks human. And he does humane, he can talk to you, and he sounds very intelligent. And I think that's 10 times scary that he can actually hold a conversation and get inside your head. He's not just grrr. Not that vampires do that, but just some, I prefer ones that can actually, it's more scary when they can actually have a conversation with you and they actually are very intelligent. And that was now, to be fair, that was my only version of that I'd seen up to that point. And then I did see the remake earlier this year, and I was just and like most people, I'm just yeah, it's okay. It does some interesting things, and, it's not badly acted or anything. It's just, the fact that it's just a short 2-hour movie, kind of is tricky with Stephen King, because his books are super long. But, I've said this before, that, like I said, that was the only adaptation I had seen. And the scene with Barlow and Father Callahan is the one that's always been imprinted in my brain, because that is so disturbing. The fact that a Catholic priest, has been taken over by the vampire. That is so scary to me, because this is a representation of God. This is the one thing that is supposedly able to defeat the monster, defeat the vampire. They have you holding up, you're supposed to hold up crosses, and your faith is the one thing that can defeat the monster, because it is eternal good. It's pure. It's, your faith it's good, the ultimate goodness. And vampires are the ultimate evil, and one of the ultimate evils, and the fact that, this Father Callahan has no faith anymore, and he's easily taken over by Barlow, is absolutely terrifying. And like I realize, even though it's an old movie, I probably it's not as old as some of those classics, so I might have just spoiled the story for you guys. But that is the one thing that stayed. That whole scene has been in my brain for years. Like that's the one thing I remember of that adaptation. And then vaguely in Rutger Hauer's performance. Um, but so anyway, so I watched that, and then I'll probably finish, Hocus Pocus tonight, this evening. It really sucks that I have to go back to work tomorrow. I have to work for 3 days in a row. I mean, it won't stop me from watching movies and stuff, because I usually watch them in the evening anyway. But, and then I'm gonna probably watch The Witches, and, there was one more witchy movie that I had. I can't remember. I have them all on my dresser over there, but I can't see it, and I don't want to risk getting up in the screen to go black. So I don't remember what the other one is, but I know The Witches is one of them. But yeah, I keep coming, I keep saying I'm gonna do Booktober again, but then I keep going back to where I'm more about the horror stuff. But yeah, so I'm still, I lost my train of thought. But anyway, I don't know what I'm gonna read next. But like I said, I think I'm gonna pick up The Trouble in Miss Montgomery Hearst. And I know what I was gonna say. That's the reason why I've been motivated to read The Witching Hour, come back to it finally, is because, I'm kind of in a witchy mood, like I was last year. So we will see. And I'm currently reading on my Kindle Penpal by Dathan. I can't remember. Dathan Albrecht, I think his name is. So far, our narrator it starts with our narrator recalling when he was a little boy, I think early teens. Well, he might have been younger than that, but the story wakes up, and it starts when he has woken up and he's lost in the middle of the woods and he cannot find his way back. And the woods of his neighborhood, and he's trying to figure it all out. And then by the time he gets home, he finally figures out via following the stars, which is funny because he implies that he's trying to follow the North Star, but he implied that it probably wasn't the North Star. It was just happened to be the brightest star. He didn't know that it might not be the North Star, but he follows it back home. And of course, the police are there. His mom's freaking out because he's been gone all day into the night, and she doesn't know where he is. And he's trying to tell his mom that he doesn't remember how he got in the woods. And of course, she doesn't believe him and is like, I told you not to go in the woods, and why won't you listen? I was so scared and worried about you. And he keeps trying to tell her, I don't remember. I just woke up in the middle of the woods. And of course, I feel like they do that a lot when there's a kid involved, where the kid talks about like something that he doesn't remember doing, and the parents are worried, and the kid tries to tell their mom or dad that I don't remember, and the parents are just like, I think they probably think it's suppressed memories, or like the kid is just making up because they don't want to get in trouble, and so they're just pretending like they don't remember. And then the mom reveals that he left a note implying that he was going to run away. But then he looks at the note. Not only does he not remember that he wrote that note, he doesn't remember writing the note, but also his name is not spelled correctly, like the way he would spell it. So and that's how it ends, where it's like, he reads the note, you get the note that he supposedly wrote, and then he tells that my name was spelled wrong, and that's how it ends. That chapter. So I'm intrigued. I'm very intrigued. I mean, and wanting to know, like, okay, what's going on. And it kind of gives me, with the whole him getting lost and being lost in the woods and not remembering how he got there, reminds me of Imaginary Friend by Stephen Chbosky, where the little boy in that story, he gets lost in these woods that him and his mom have just moved into town, and they are warned that, oh, don't go in the woods, it's dangerous. I mean, which you shouldn't do that anyway, especially when you're a little kid. Unless you're familiar with the woods and know how to navigate it, can read a compass and all that. And somehow he ends up in the woods at one point, and he wakes up several days later, and he doesn't remember, and he ends up, you discover that he's on a mission, but he doesn't remember why. He doesn't remember who told him to that. He just needs to do this. This thing, and it made me, and that's what Penpal, the beginning of Penpal made me think of, that scene, the part in the How Imaginary Friend starts, where the little boy in that story, I think his name is Christopher. Christopher ended up getting lost in the woods, but not remembering anything, and then when he's found, he realizes he has a mission to do something he has to build, something he has to do. But nothing more creepy than getting lost in the woods when you're a kid, which I debate about the girl reading the Girl Who Loved Tom Gordon, because that one is about a girl getting lost in the woods. So I might still I could probably still like it even if I'm not a baseball fan. And I don't know I'm not a fan of Tom Gordon. I don't care about baseball. But it's not a super long book, so I don't know. I might read that one at some point. Because, like I said, the idea of getting lost in the woods is scary. And especially, it's so, because you're just trying to figure out your way around. And I already get frustrated when something happens with the internet and I can't figure out how to fix it. Or, when my iPod says, it's full, and I'm trying to find, okay, what do I need to do to fix it to make it so it's not as full? What do I need to delete? And getting so frustrated. So I already get frustrated about that. I mean, imagine getting lost in the woods and getting frustrated because you can't figure out the maze and the puzzle. And like I said, I get frustrated with puzzles too. If I can't figure out where a piece goes, and at least with a puzzle, when you're in the comfort of your home and you're just making a puzzle, you can stop and take a break. But with if you're lost somewhere, you can't just stop and wait around. You have to figure, because especially if you're in the middle of the woods, because you don't know what's out there, what animals, and if you, it's hard to escape because, you can't, want to hide somewhere so the animals won't try to eat you and all, so. But anyway, so I'm reading that one. I'm trying so hard to not say words like so and but it's really hard because I don't have a script. I'm just saying whatever pops in my head, and then if I don't remember what I was just thinking about, then I'm gonna do it again. So I guess I'm really trying not to say those words, but it's really hard. I'm gonna stop, and then I just want to update you guys. I would love to know what you are currently reading. Are you a horror fan? Do you read horror books, or do you watch horror movies or watch horror TV shows? I'm always curious about that because I know it's a very popular genre, whether it's in the film format or book format. It's one of the more next to, I think, fantasy, my 3 favorite genres, I think, are probably the most popular genres amongst readers and viewers. And so I'm assuming that there are people that watch my channel that are horror fans. Would love to know if you're out there what you guys are, or do you do you guys read or watch horror all year round? Because I would like to get more. I'm always trying to get more into horror and reading it all year round instead of just October. This was actually inspired by Mike from Mike's Book Reviews. He did he was trying to do that as well, and also read other horror authors as well. And especially because Anne Rice died a couple years ago, And I think he's trying to find a female, a female author to kind of replace her in his fandom heart. So, which he's a good channel, which I have already recommended him, but yeah, he is a really good channel for horror recommendations, I think. And so is Shades of Orange. I started watching her channel, and I actually follow her reviews now on Goodreads. And she actually, I got really excited because she had, did a review of Horror Movie by Paul Tremblay. So it was kind of cool, it was kind of cool to see someone that I actually follow, that I actually, I watch on YouTube as well. And I saw her immediately, was like, I'm going to follow her because I watch this channel on YouTube. And I read her review of, which I think I'm going to be a little more nicer about Horror Movie than she was. Because I know she didn't really like it. I keep going back and forth between, am I going to give it a 3 stars where I still liked it, but it wasn't like the best thing ever, or am I going to give it 2 stars where it's like, I just was kind of about it. Because to me, 3 stars, which is funny because I saw people give it 3 stars that were like, I was start their review with, I was disappointed. And for me personally, I'm feeling like 3 stars isn't a disappointment for me, or like it's more like I didn't love it, but it wasn't the worst thing in the world. Like 3 stars are kind of like middle ground where it was still pretty good, but I wasn't disappointed necessarily, but I didn't love it either. But then everybody has their meanings of what each of the star ratings is very different for everybody. For me, 3 stars is not a bad thing. It's not a disappointment. It's just a kind of a neutral where it's just where it wasn't bad, but it wasn't the best either. And I wouldn't say I wouldn't call myself disappointed in a 3-star reading. It's just like it did, it kept me, I was intrigued by it, it kept me engaged, but it wasn't necessarily one I'm going to read multiple times over. But it's not one that I viscerally hate or was even disappointed with. Like, I got what I expected, Well, I don't know if although I can't guarantee that Horror Movie is what I expected. Because I was kind of, but the funny thing is, and I think the point, and I think Tremblay was making this point, is that with these stories, you expect it, you're hoping for it to be one thing, and you're really excited, and you're speculating, but then when you see it or read it, like when you consume it, it ends up being like, or like, oh, that's good, but it wasn't as good as I thought it was going to be. Like, I think there's a lot of times where something outlives its original source material and becomes so popular, and then you finally get to it, and it's not what you expected, and not always in a good way. I mean, it's the same thing with books and movies and TV shows that are hyped so much that when you finally consume it, I think that's why people don't like it when something's hyped. Because what if it ends up being not as good as everyone thinks it is? Like, the way everyone hypes out to be, what if for you it's like, just not what you thought it was going to be. Like, everyone gets so excited. Like, I do think hype can potentially ruin a story because it gets so popular. I mean, you're happy for it and for the creator that it's so popular and everyone loves it so much because they get money and just alkaloids, and just the fact that people love it will make them proud and happy. But then it overflows with popularity, and sometimes you think people might be a little biased, and just because it's so popular, people are all, I was just watching a new person where I watched a couple of I just decided to watch some of their videos because the algorithm recommended it to me, and I know I can't entirely trust the algorithm, but they recommended it, and so I clicked on the video, and it was talking about hype. The guy, like, I've only watched one video, so I don't have his name memorized or anything, but he was talking about hype, in the video, and my thought was that, well, maybe they genuinely do like it. Maybe they genuinely think it's really good. It just happens to be a popular thing. It happens to be a popular story. But maybe but then I guess you can't tell. You can never know if that person genuinely just loves it, happens to love it of their own free will. Because, he was talking about how sometimes people inevitably are like, oh, everyone loves it, so I better love it too. Or they just are afraid to say that they don't love it, or that they have some criticisms, like some things that they didn't love about it. Like, even if they love the general thing, the general story, there might be some things that they don't love about it, some aspects, or some valid criticisms, but they're afraid to say it because people get so impassioned. I mean, I admit it sometimes hurts when something that I love and think is amazing, and then someone points out, like, even hearing my friend Larissa, I don't love this book as much as another one of this author's work, but I do actually like Mansfield Park. I think it's really good. It has its flaws, and I can understand why people don't love Fanny as much as, like, Elizabeth or Emma or even Anne. And yeah, it's very moral and very, like, and Edmund's a wet blanket. But I still kind of like it. I admire Fanny's main character and everything, and I like what it talks about. I like how it explores morality and everything. And Larissa, like most people, didn't think it was, I was like, I mean, it wasn't, or Larissa was like, oh, it wasn't bad, but, I don't really love it. And there were a lot of things I don't like, and it did hurt a little bit, because I do like it. It's not my all-time favorite book by Jane Austen, but I still really liked it. And, I've talked to my sister about, like, okay, what's the best response to people when you like something, like, how do you respond to them without getting mad or making it seem like you're arguing with them or making it seem like you can't understand how they don't love it? And, I always struggle with that. And I did talk to, and then I also did talk to Larissa herself, and it was, she was like, well, I actually kind of love discussing with people, and even if we have different opinions and all that. And I mean, it's definitely easier to do that with it's someone that you know personally that's a friend. I mean, there are friends that probably butt heads and stuff and when they don't agree, but it's definitely easier when it's someone that you know personally that knows you, because then you know how to, like, you get each other, and you can debate with each other and argue with each other with it being perfectly harmless. I mean, unless you let it go bad. With a stranger, it's a lot harder because you don't know how they're going to respond to you. You don't know if they're going to get mad or if you're going to get mad, and so yeah, it's very awkward when it's someone you don't even know that well. But so yeah, okay, so I'm gonna stop here because I kind of got off track, and I was trying to end it, and I started talking about something else. So, as always, I hope you're enjoying your reading. I mean, and again, I'd love to know if you're a horror reader. Be curious about that. Please share in the comments below if you like horror, or do you like horror movies or horror shows. I know there's some, like The Haunting of Hill House had a new version of a TV show that came out like a couple years ago, and then there's also Bly Manor. But anyway, I'm gonna stop talking. I hope you are enjoying your October, and I will talk to you all later. All right, bye.